Hello and welcome to Newswire. I'm Jawad Tehami. At a time when the entire world grapples with COVID-19 pandemic, India's belligerence continues unabated. Innocent civilians along the line of control and the working boundary are being targeted by Indian forces as unprovoked fighting and is resulting in casualties. India has committed over 850 ceasefire violations during this year alone. In 2019, at least 252 people were martyred and 261 were wounded in over 3,300 ceasefire violations by Indian forces at the line of control. Pakistan has repeatedly registered protests against violations and urged India to abide by the ceasefire agreement. To talk about India's increasing warmongering and its impact on regional stability and the world peace, we are joined by Lieutenant General Retired Ashraf Saleem, analyst from Lahore, and Salman Bashir, former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, joining us from Islamabad. Thank you for your time at Newswire. I will begin the discussion with you, General Saleem. Rather than focusing fighting the pandemic at home, India is increasing tensions at LOC, but deliberately targeting the civilians. What sort of an approach this one is?
I think whatever India is doing in Kashmir on LOC is just a symptom. The real problem lies within India, because that is where the Indian minorities, particularly the Muslims, they're not only facing COVID-19, but they're also likely to face Holocaust 2020, which looks to be very close. And Indian government, in fact, I would not call it BJP government, I'll even call it RSS government, because the real face is the RSS. So then we can see the way they are conducting, the way they are carrying out atrocities on Muslims in India in the name of, sometimes they call that Tablighi Jamaat. They are the ones who are spreading COVID-19 in India. Sometimes they would say something. They're blaming all sorts of things. Not only Indian Muslims, but the RSS attitude has gone even across the borders. They are blaming Arabs. There have been many statements from Arab states, particularly Kuwait, UAE, some of the princes. I think the famous video which is going around, they said that Indians, despite earning a lot of money from Middle East, they have started abusing Muslims there. The state of Muslims within India is even worse. And while they are doing all this, they're keeping the COVID-19 at the face. They are indulging into atrocities on Muslims inside India. And they are also carrying out atrocities on Muslims living across or astride the LOC in Kashmir. Now, this may look to be very innocent sort of a attention diverter for the Indians. But there are real motives behind it. India, as we know, they are even converting the whole India as a state into a Hindu state, Hindutva state. They're following that kind of ideology where they would like to cleanse India of all Muslims, particularly the Muslims who are enjoying influence somewhere. Otherwise, there are very innocent Muslims living all across. The poor people are being tortured. Some of them have been subjected to death even. So it's not only the symptom is not only across the LOC. It's something lying much deeper behind LOC inside India, and what they are doing in occupied Kashmir, that also has to be taken into account when we consider these innocent-looking
General Saleem, you just said that Indian intentions are to cleanse India according to their understanding and ideology from Muslims. But there is a huge number of Muslim community living in India that constitutes over 200 million Muslims in India. We'll come to this point. Ambassador Bashir, when we talk about the ceasefire arrangement between Pakistan and India of 2003, what is the spirit of that particular agreement? Can you shed a little bit of light on that one?
Yes, the 2003 ceasefire understanding was something which was the cardinal pillar for the process that was initiated to have some sort of accommodation between the two countries. And of course, that on that rested the entire edifice that was being endeavored by the two sides during that period, 2004-2007. We have seen that thing fall apart. It started more intensely, I think, with the advent of the BJP government in Delhi. And as General Saab has said, I think what we are seeing now is compounding of mistakes as we see it by the Indian government deliberately. We have in Delhi a regime which is bent on creating trouble. First of all, I think because of its ideology, which is radical and as well as an expansionist ideology. So I think what we are seeing in terms of the ceasefire demolition every day by the Indian side is part of their ideological agenda. And I think in Pakistan we need to take this seriously. In fact, the situation in occupied Kashmir has been explosive for a number of years. But now the new ingredients that are being added will make it into something that it will be difficult for the region and for the world to contain. And I think it's a very serious situation. I think in the backdrop of the COVID spread, the inclination and the proclivity of the Indians to pursue on this ideological, expansionist, radical path, which is destructive of peace, is something which deserves attention on the part of major powers in the international community.
Okay, General Saleem, you already mentioned that the deeper intention of Indian government led by BJP is to eradicate Muslims from India, but there are over 200 million Muslims living in India. Do you think such tactics would help India to actually achieve the target of what they are thinking about?
The Hindutva ideology, which they're trying to propound all over within Indian boundaries, not only Indian boundary, but across Indian boundaries, also within South Asia, they would try that. And I think the Muslims of India, which to certain estimates, they are about 25 crores, 250 to 25 million people, they need to get united. They will have to present a united face, political as well as socially. They have to get united. They must make their weight felt within India. And I'm sure Indians will try this, but will they succeed also? They have been trying so many things in the past also. They have been trying to, if they have their way, there wouldn't have been a Pakistan by now. So they've been trying all that. They will try to eliminate Muslims, or at least they reduce them to the status of Dalits, as they are so socially, I think, used to treat their minorities. I think they will try to do that. And Muslims will have to put up a united face. Muslims can't take it lying down, just like that. And I'm sure India is creating a bigger menace to peace in this area, in this region. And it will not only involve Indian Muslims, but it will involve the entire subcontinent. Because we can't be oblivious to the fate of Muslims within India. Same is the case with other Muslims living in subcontinent. Look at what is happening in Assam. Can the Bangladeshi Muslims be oblivious to what is happening to Muslims in Assam? They're so akin to each other, they're so close to each other. Same, we can say that this sort of attitude and this sort of conduct by Indian political forces, even to the extent of saffronizing their military even. I mean, we are hearing that they're trying to cleanse Muslims and other minorities, Sikhs also from the army. So they would like to have a saffron army. So that is the kind of attitude which is going to spoil the peace in the area. And it's high time the international forces, I would say the UN, the superpowers, Russia, China, USA, and other European Union powers, they must also take a cognizance of this kind of attitude being displayed by the Indians, especially under BJP and RSS. So that is what, in fact, they are hoping. Indians might hope to cleanse India of Muslims, but in the process, they'll create such a big problem in this area that, that the peace won't be seen in this area anymore. And I'm sure before that, the international forces, UN, and everybody should take notice of this kind of belligerency on the part of Indian political forces.
Okay. Ambassador Bashir, Indian Charge d'Affaires Gaurav Ahluwalia was summoned to the Foreign Office to lodge the protest against the recent violations. When the details of ceasefire violations are shared with the Indian representative, how and in what time and language are those protests responded to by Indians?
I think in most of the cases, they do not respond at that particular point in time. Most, I would imagine, they would say either we will pass it on to Delhi. I mean, that is the pro forma thing. Hardly they would say we take note of it. And very rarely will they say that we do not accept. But that is a formality. I think the real value of launching these protests is not only to add to statistics from the Pakistani side of the violations, but this is also shared with the United Nations and the UNMUGI. So it is useful as in terms of a record, at least internationally, with the United Nations Security Council. So that is the principal value of these protests, I believe. But let me just add something. I think what we are seeing in terms of the ceasefire violations is also in a way symptomatic of the instinct of the BJP government to divert attention and externalize its internal problems. The fact is that we are seeing sort of a meltdown, social and economic meltdown within India. The so-called rational voices were stymied. They were silenced. And if you look at the hysteria that prevails and is being propagated by the Indian media, it also reflects a sort of wave of repression against reason and against freedom of expression, which is all prevalent in India in these days and has been for some time. So I think the proclivity of the Indian government to externalize its internal problems is probably also a significant aspect of what we are seeing happening. But of course, as far as Pakistan is concerned, we cannot be indifferent. Now, it's not only a question of Muslim minorities in India. It is much more because, as General Saab rightly pointed out, the Indian system had tried to make inroads in the larger Islamic community, particularly in the Gulf states. They succeeded to a certain extent, but now we are seeing that Islamic Arab countries are wakening up to the situation. And I think they have crossed all limits of decency in terms of spewing hatred against the Muslims and Islam. And that, to my mind, presents a very diseased state of affairs, a diseased state of mind, insofar as the present dispensation in India is concerned.
So, Ambassador Bashir, do you think this pattern has increased over the ceasefire violations at the line of control and the maltreatment of Muslims within India, especially after the BJP government took power back in 2014 and onwards in 2019 as well?
That is very much the case. I was the High Commissioner to India period 2012 to 14, early 14, and I just returned before the elections in 2014 in India. And I think at that time, of course, the situation was still a bit hopeful. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, I believe, was sincere, and he was committed to having some sort of accommodation with Pakistan. There were a lot of initiatives that had been the works, the back channel, etc. But with the change of government in Delhi, we got the right-wingers, the hardline Hindutva elements, who came to power on the Hindutva notions, and they were able to sort of get a lot of resonance from the electorate. And they have pursued that as a means of their domestic politics, winning elections, whether state elections or the national elections. So, of course, in 2013, the first thing, the jarring thing that had happened was those accusations of the beheadings on the line of control. And at that time, the foreign minister of Pakistan, Rahmani, herself had offered to visit Delhi and to come and discuss this with the Indian side. And that showed the responsiveness and the maturity of the Pakistani side to deal with the LOC issues and, to make sure that there was respect for the ceasefire. But now it's being violated every day. And this has been going on for a number of years under the BJP.
Thank you very much for being at Newswire. Ambassador Salman Bashir, former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, joined us from Islamabad. And Lieutenant General retired Ashraf Saleem, Analyst, joined us from Lahore. Thank you for your time, both of you gentlemen. And with this, we come to the end of the first segment of the Newswire. In the second, we will discuss Arab countries condemning ethnic attacks against Muslims in India. But right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back to Newswire. As ethnic attacks against Muslims are on the rise in India, the hate industry and the naked Hindutva is being exposed. Various segments of society in Gulf countries have condemned rising Islamophobia in the so-called largest democracy in the world, that is India. Members of the royal families and the ministers have also condemned anti-Muslim sentiment. Kuwait's Council of Ministers has urged the OIC and the international community to intervene in the matter. Princess Hind Al-Kazimi of UAE has also reacted to the hatred against Muslims being spread by the Hindutva Brigade. The tensions in India are rising on religious lines as the government and media have accused Muslims of spreading COVID-19. Is India's government complicit in fanning the flames of hatred and bigotry against Muslims? To talk more about this, we are joined at Newswire today by Mr. Abdulaziz Alghashian, Analyst and Lecturer of International Relations at the University of Essex from Colchester, and Mr. Khaled Almaeena, former Editor-in-Chief, Arab News and Saudi Gazette, and Advocate of Peace and Human Rights from Riyadh. Thank you very much for your time. I'll start the discussion with you, Mr. Almaeena. That is, now we are seeing that condemnation is coming from the Arab countries against the hatred and the anti-Muslim sentiment in India. Is it a sort of an alarm for the Indian government led by BJP?
Well, I think it should not only sound an alarm for them, it should sound an alarm for the people and the captains of business and industry who for years have taken us for granted. What I see every day is not something connected just with Muslims. It has to do with the Dalits, with the minority Christians and others, but the venom and the powerful force of hatred is against Muslims. And let me tell you, I think it stems from an inferiority complex of being ruled by the Mughals and all these nonsensical ideas that are coming up. But I truly believe now the people in the Gulf are aware of what's happening and are going to take action. Civil society, governments, organizations should also join hands in condemning what is a very tragic situation in India. And this is a strong message for the Indian government, who I truly believe is overlooking what's being done by some of their supporters.
Okay, Mr. Alghas, violence against Muslims is surging in India, and that has been condemned by Arab leaders as well as the general public. Do you think this particular hatred has taken its roots deeper into the Indian society after the BJP-led government came into power, especially after 2014?
Well, first, I'd like to say Ramadan Mubarak to everyone. Well, it is indeed, I do agree with you in that respect. But we have to, I think, put things into context. Unfortunately, nationalism around the world is on the up. Many places around the world have this populist rhetoric, and it is no different in India. Now, for me, what I find very astonishing is that although there are rhetoric and statements from Arab leaders showing their dyspathy towards this hatred of Muslims in India, unfortunately, they are limited in that regards, because what they are showing is that although there's a growing concern, it will not materialize very much, because I believe many countries have seen India as an opportunity for their economic and political interests. So these aspects are, till now, symbolic. We hope it could escalate to more political pressure on India. And there's one other thing also that has to be mentioned, is that any form of oppression of Muslims will always instigate a call by some Arab states or some even Muslim entities, whether it's Arab states or Iran or Turkey, to instrumentalize this situation in India to boost its prowess, to boost its image to the Muslim world. So we have to also take that into consideration, that some countries will take this as an opportunity to show their leadership and try to be more populist to their own audiences too.
Okay, Mr. Almaeena, and citizenship law protests were already going on in India, and it was also deemed as an anti-Muslim. Now the government is targeting the Muslim community of over 200 million. Has Hindutva ideology blinded the government so much that it doesn't realize the after effects of such hatred?
Well, I tell you one thing, I tweet about this always. India, unfortunately, and we wish India well for everything. I mean, I don't find any difference between any of the religions, but India will turn into a land of marauders where robber barons will be there. There will be warlords and all, because the way they are going on for this Hindutva. India is a diverse nation. I disagree with what my friend said about nationalism. Nationalism comes up when you are somewhere in a country against a minority. The Muslims are part and parcel of India. They rule India at different stages. They are the same ethnic group. So here, it is not nationalism, it is fascism, it is religious intolerance, and it is suppression of the rights of other people. I think India will not be safe, because instead of focusing on COVID-19, of progress and do other things, all the Indians do is to lynch people, Muslims, or to kill people, or to find different people. 2 days ago, 3 Dalits were lynched. They are Hindus, but they are lower class Hindus. So I think India will suffer a lot. Let me be very frank. The popular sentiment in the Gulf and in the Arab world, forget, as the professor said, Iran and Turkey, I'm not concerned with them. And we are not in a race. We are in a race to fight for human rights and not be comparing ourselves with other countries. I believe so that the people of the Gulf have a moral duty, and the governments and institutions, to stand up with their brethren in India and elsewhere, be it in the Philippines or the Uyghur, as long as they're on the right. We do not want to interfere in other people's internal affairs. But this thing of India, the images of killing, images of rapes, killing of people, it is too much. And I do think that the state has not said anything. And if you remember and saw the tweet of the Prime Minister, it was the PMO, Prime Minister's office. Mr. Modi did not take out any tweet from his personal step. All he needs to do is stand in front of a microphone, have the guts, and say enough is enough. And I hope the RSS thugs and murderers will listen to him.
Okay, Mr. Almaeena, when we talk about the Kuwaiti condemnation, the Council of the Ministers has called on the OIC and the international community to intervene in the matter. What do you think are the options at the hands of OIC in order to intervene in this matter and impress upon India to control and curb the rising Islamophobia and the anti-Muslim sentiment there in the country?
There are not many options, but at least there should be a message sent to the Indians. And let me tell you, there are many secular Indians who are sacrificing life and limb to come out and stand and speak for the rights of these people. Suddenly to have 200 million people as a minority and to think of pogroms and think of eradication is total nonsense. I think the Gulf countries deal with India. You know, yesterday they said some idiots were saying that these are BJP people and MPs don't buy vegetables from the Muslims. And I tweeted, I said, why don't you also stop buying oil from us or gas? So you see, this is the same thing. You cannot be selective. And I think the Gulf states should stand as one voice and speak out.
Okay, you're of the view that the countries have to stand together and speak about whatever is going on in India against Muslims as one voice. Mr. Alghashian, this particular attitude has been condemned by Princess Hind Al-Qasimi as well, and she also tweeted that the Hindutva should be sent back to where it actually belongs. So do you think after so much rampant anti-Muslim sentiment in India, the ties between India and the Arab world would go in jeopardy?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say about my colleague, what he said about fascism and race and nationalism, I think nationalism is a prerequisite to fascism. So this is something that has to be looked at. And I think even though I still stand by it, that nationalism is all over, increasing all over the world. It's a global trend. In this regard, that whether or not the Gulf will distance itself from India, I do believe, and I hope that there will be more pressure on India, but I'm very suspicious that it will materialize into something more than just rhetoric, and it will materialize into requests. If we've seen the language that has been used towards India, it has not been robust enough, and it hasn't been anything that really indicates that there will be a gulf between these countries. So I'm hopeful that it could materialize, because I do call for what many others call for, which is the human rights, because it's not really a Muslim problem. It's a human rights problem. And I think we all have to pay attention to that. However, I do believe that the interests that Gulf states have in India now as a budding market or as opportunities, I think perhaps could limit that potential of materializing anything more in regards or exerting more pressure on India. And, you know, we have to look at this in a more nuanced light. There is this balancing act that we are going to see now in the future. We're going to see how the Gulf countries are going to balance its moral obligation to the Indian population there with with trying to hold its interests in India. So it's going to be a balance act.
Okay, Mr. Abdulaziz Alghashian, Analyst of International Relations at the University of Essex, joining us from Colchester. Thank you for your time at Newswire. Mr. Khaled Almaeena, if such an Indian attitude continues, won't it make Indian expatriates vulnerable in the Arab countries?
A good question. I mean, people would then not start dealing with them. People would not start employing with them. And as I said before, that there are certain areas you can go into. But I do not want to apply the principle of collective guilt. I see on tweet a lot of Indians and Hindus are fighting against this, but the whole drama orchestrated by the state organs, the state militias, the state terrorists has really gone by leaps and bounds. And you see pictures of people being killed and all. The media has been taken over by this Hindutva, the RSS brigade and all. So there are limits, yes. But of course, economically, there will be less. You see, people are the prime movers. They are the motivators. So people will stop getting people from India, or they will stop dealing or buying some things. And I think there will be some kind of dent. But it's not because to please the Gulf states or the Arab states, India has to do a lot of soul searching within and find out what they are doing, whether they want to subscribe to Gandhian principles or Nehruvian ideology, or just go ahead this killing ideology that is there.
Mr. Khaled Almaeena, the U.S. Commission on National Religious Freedom has also expressed concern over the religious segregation in India during this particular COVID-19 pandemic in particular. What are the options for the international community, especially the U.S., to intervene in this matter and impress upon India to rectify the behavior?
You have to have strong statements, as the gentleman said, robust statements, not only from the people, but from others, from academia, from members of civil society, from parliaments, from governments. I think there has to be, the United States should come out, and Mr. Trump, who claims to be a friend of Mr. Modi, should come out and tell him, hey, brother, that's more than enough. You just can't go forward. The EU should come out with a statement. But now people are embroiled in the COVID-19 issue. So that's why this period has been used by the Indians to further their aims. And I tell you this not as a Muslim or as a Gulf citizen, as a human being. What is happening in India is pure genocide. It's like a Holocaust of the Muslim people.
It's just like a Holocaust of the Muslim people, India, which is taking at the behest of the Indian government that is led by BJP. Mr. Khaled Almaeena, analyst and former editor-in-chief, Arab News and Saudi Gazette, advocate of peace and human rights. Thank you for joining us from Riyadh. We really appreciate that. Now we are joined by Dr. Taslim Ahmed Rahmani, analyst and president of Muslim Political Council of India, joining us from Delhi. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Rahmani. The condemnation over what exactly is happening in India with Muslims is coming from the Arab countries now. Is it what the world has started finally seeing, what Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has been alluding to since the revocation of Article 370, that what could be the sad state of affairs, particularly for Indian Muslims, after that act of Indian government?
Certainly, this is a sad condition that the minorities in general and Muslims in particular are suffering in this country, even despite of so many of the constitutional guarantees and guards. Those are not implemented, and Hindutva agenda is very openly trying to be implemented under the garb of this COVID-19 also. The MLAs, the leaders of the political party, the BJP, they are openly announcing that the vendors, vegetable vendors, the fruit vendors, and the small scale industry people, and nothing should be purchased and by the Muslim community people. That is very openly being said here in so many quarters. And the government, though, the Prime Minister has tweeted once that this should not be done, but there is no impact on the ground. They are because they are not taking any action. Their towering leaders, their MPs, their MLAs, their ministers are issuing such kind of appeals that not to buy anything from the Muslim vendors, and there is no action from them. Even the Raj Thackeray, one of the Shiv Sena MNS leader, who said that the Tablighi people should be shot at instantly. There is no action against them. So these things shows that now the whole world is looking. First of all, the European media was quoting all such things. Now when they in Gulf countries, UAE, in Kuwait, and other countries, when they themselves felt the burn, they are now openly criticizing the same thing. So whatever, but I know that there was an Israel and there is a Palestine for last 70, 60 years. There is a Kashmir for 70 years. If they have to fight their own war by their own selves, we have to fight this war by our own self. Certainly, the people will come out, they will issue the statement, they will go to the United Nations, there will be so many resolutions, but ultimately, the people like Myanmar people, they have to fight, they have to bear all the consequences by their own. It's same with the Indian Muslim. We have to bear all these things, and we are thankful that if somebody speaks the truth and justice, that's very much welcome. The world must stand. If we are a global community, if the world has become the global village, then it is welcome that everybody shall stand up. But merely issuing the statement and passing some resolution does not work, we have seen in the past.
Dr. Rahmani, what about the relations between India and the Arab countries in particular? Because clear-cut condemnation and criticism of these acts going on in India is coming from Arab countries. And there is a huge proportion of Indian expatriates working in Arab countries as well. So what kind of an effect do you think it would have on those expatriates as well?
Impact certainly, and we welcome actually the justice. Whatever the justice, we welcome them. We do not expect any favor from anybody, but there must be a justice and there must be some action. And we have seen after these statements made by the ruling class and the important people and MPs from Kuwait and UAE, there is some impact that the Prime Minister has come out with a tweet. And then the Minister of the Minority Affairs, Mr. Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi, has come out with a statement. Then the RSS chief, Mr. Mohan Bhagwat, has come out with a statement. So these are the impact of all these activities, because it is actually impacting the economic ties with the country. That's why this is a pressure. But then the second day, the Kuwait government, they very openly said that we are a friendly country and we are not going to interfere in any of the internal issues of India. So that is also an act of balancing, kind of a balancing act of whatever had been said earlier. Then they are said we are not going to, and certainly they must not and they should not, nobody will say that we are going to interfere in the internal affairs of any country, including India. They must not say, but this pressure at least work a little, but there is a lot to be done in the times to come. The situation which is going very grim in the country after the COVID is over, we see a very large number of kind of social boycott thing in the country, particularly with distancing with Muslim community, and that can be a dangerous trend.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Taslim Rahmani, analyst and President, Muslim Political Council of India, for joining us from Delhi at Newswire. With this, we come to the end of today's Newswire. With more in-depth analysis, we'll be back with you tomorrow. Till then, take good care.